I mentioned I was in internal audit. I had done a lot of audit work in Latin America, and an opportunity came up to manage Bausch & Lomb's business in Mexico. And one day I was remembering in my kitchen, I got a phone message from the head of international operations. He said, "Would you like to go to Mexico?" out of the blue. So first thing I realized is I'm going to have to convince my wife that this is a good idea or it's not going to happen. So Michelle was gracious, and we ended up going to Mexico for 3 years. Then I got another phone call. That was an absolutely wonderful time, by the way. Mexico was going through a lot of upheaval, and it was a chance to rebuild the business that had really fallen on hard times. We did that, and this is a real important lesson. Nothing in life that really matters gets accomplished by you alone. It generally gets accomplished with others. Cultivate the relationships that you have around you. It's very, very difficult. Solo performers, people who just do work by themselves, generally don't accomplish as much as people who learn how to work in teams. So I was in Mexico, and I got a call, and they said, "We want you to come back to Rochester because we want you to be the VP of Finance for then the largest global product line, $1.1 billion. So it really was the CFO of a big chunk of the business for about 3 years, and that was a fantastic opportunity. In that business, we sell solutions, contact lenses, and related products. You may use some of those. So I did that for 3 years. When they came back to me again 3 years later, there's a sort of 3-year progression here, and they asked me to be the regional president, not only now for Latin America, but also for Canada. And so we moved back to Mexico for 3 years. So I spent, in the past decade, 6 years of my time outside the U.S. It's an interesting thing that happens to you when you do that. There are segments culturally, in terms of my understanding, that of things that happened in the U.S. when I was outside the U.S. that I don't have any memory of because I didn't live through them. So the internet was gaining a tremendous amount of steam, I remember, when I came back in '98, but it hadn't really taken off in Mexico. So I had to race to catch up. But what's really funny is when my friends are telling me about TV shows or music during that period, I have no knowledge. I can tell them about what was going on in Latin America during that period of time, but no knowledge of what went on. But it was a tremendous experience, a tremendous opportunity to live in another country, experience a different culture. And I think also something that Americans could benefit from, and if there was one experience I would wish for you, is really to live in another country. And if you haven't had that opportunity or you have it, take it. It will open your eyes wide. We are all the same, really, when you cut through the go past or get past the surface part of who we are. Everyone wants the same. Everyone wants to do well in life. Everyone wants to provide for their families. We do it, we express it different culturally, and it was wonderful, a great experience to live that out, being someone different in a culture that was not mine. My parents are from Puerto Rico. I was mentioning the group earlier. The Caribbean is very different from Mexico, and yet for 6 years I lived in a culture that people embraced me, I embraced them, and it changed my perspective on life. So if you ever have that opportunity, do it. And then finally, my mom got sick at the end of 2002. I took a leave of absence, and I had an opportunity to go into higher ed. I was finishing a doctorate. I don't know how I did all that. I kind of closed my eyes, and somehow it happened. And I got a chance to experience higher ed, the difficulties, the challenges of being in higher ed. But to me, it was just another management challenge. I've been involved in management challenges all my career. It was yet another one, and a great experience. When that ended, I was offered the opportunity to become the treasurer of Bausch & Lomb, which is what I do. What does the treasurer do? Really simple. The treasurer takes control of the cash, and I like to say controls the company as a result. So if there's a check that needs to be written, it comes out of the treasurer's office. If money needs to move, the treasurer does it. We have a little saying, us treasurers, Jeff won't like hearing this, earnings are a matter of opinion, cash flow is a matter of fact. Cash is really what moves companies. So a great experience. In that job, I do a bunch of different things. I get involved from acquisitions. We made an acquisition of a pharmaceutical company in China last year. It was the first cross-borders healthcare or pharmaceutical acquisition in China. We were the first company to do that. Great experience. I learned a lot. In my job, beyond just doing treasury, I also get involved in tax matters too now. So fun stuff. I enjoy what I do. Great challenge, and it's been a great ride so far. But what I really wanted to talk about was not so much what's happened with me, but a little bit about what's happened in my career and how you can apply that to your own life. And I think also a little bit about integrating your career also with faith, because that's a really important issue. But first I want to talk about success. There's three views here that I think are interesting. Now, I got to tell you who these three people are, so let me read their bios, because people don't know who these people are. First of all, many of you may not know who Booker Washington was, but at the beginning of the century, he was probably the foremost African-American intellectual. He fell into disrepute because his stance was, he was called an accommodationist. And so later, when more radical and more aggressive people succeeded him, they really kind of branded him as someone who was just looking to accommodate with society at that time. I think that's a very unfair, a fair assessment of his legacy. He founded the Tuskegee Institute, and he talks about success as being measured by the obstacles you overcome, and I really can relate to that.
Would be a real job killer, especially harmful to the small businesses that are the engine.
I think we caught a frequency here.
If he gets his way, we all pay. He's got to let the liver we can't afford.
He was a slave who rose to prominence and became, as I said, one of the foremost educators of his time in the early 20th century. The second person is John Wooden. How many people, by show of hands, know who John Wooden is? Oh, yeah, that's what I thought. There's a generational gap here for sure. John Wooden is perhaps the best coach of all time. Coach of the UCLA basketball team. His teams were dominant, just absolutely dominant in the 60s. John Wooden's also an amazing person, a Christian, a molder of character. I had the opportunity to hear one of his disciples, if you will, a player named Bill Walton, who was one of the 50 greatest basketball players elected last time they did that. And the things he said about John Wooden, how he influenced his life, are absolutely amazing. But I like what he says: success is peace of mind, a direct result of knowing you did the best to become the best that you are capable of becoming. I really like that. But I thought there needs to be a little bit of balance in thinking about success, so I added this quote from T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot's an interesting person, a bit of a disillusioned Christian, an Anglican. He converted to Anglicanism early in his career, but he's kind of a gloomy guy. So he says that success is relative. It's what we make of the mess it's what we can make of the mess we made of things. There's a certain element of truth to that. So why talk about success? Because I think success is really, thinking about it is important. The fact that you have three definitions of success suggests to me that you have to define success in your own terms, and that's the only point that I'm making. Three very successful people define success somewhat differently. All of us define success in our lives based on what we think is important. But I think there is something important here. Now, you saw my career. I wandered a lot, did a lot of different things. But at one point, I think when I went to MBA school, I realized I have to have a plan for how this thing is going to work out. And then I started to really plan the things that I wanted to do. So it was no coincidence I got a doctorate. I wanted to do that. That was a goal. No coincidence I went to Bauchelon, Mexico. I had the opportunity. I had designated that as a 5-year goal. I did that. It's no surprise that I became the regional president, because I had designated that as a goal. You do have to aim yourself in the right direction to get where you want to go. You need to think about that to make it happen. But I think if you're going to build a work and a career plan, and I know many of you are early in this process, You need to define success correctly. Define it on your terms. There's a lot of people who think that success is defined by what they see of Donald Trump on television.